Hi, I'm Claire Trujillo. I serve the district as the Assistant Director of Instruction and Intervention.
And I'm Ellen Foster. I'm the Coordinator of Instruction and Gifted Coordinator for Brunswick City Schools. We're going to go through a little walkthrough of HMH, just hopefully to make you feel a little bit more comfortable as we get started with this new curriculum.
Where do you begin? Make sure that you're referencing the pacing guides that have been provided. Pat sent out an email recently that has them all in one spot so that you can reference those easily. And we know that serving as your curriculum maps this year, but I would encourage you to make sure that you're making notes and adding to that throughout the year. They're not very specific right now because we need to give ourselves a year to really get to know the materials. So as you're doing that, we encourage you to take notes about what selections worked well, what parts of the components that you make sure you really want to hit in certain modules and all of those things. On the pacing guides, you will find some time guidance. We know that between Orton Gillingham and all the things in HMH, if you look at the timeline that they provide you in HMH, we don't have that much time to teach all those things. We can't do everything that HMH provides us, and I don't even think we're supposed to. So we wanted to provide a little bit of guidance for you. So in the pacing guide, you'll see that the background knowledge section for fourth and fifth grade says 15 minutes. For third grade, I believe it says 15 to 30 to allow for if your class is needing more time with Orton Gillingham. And then you'll see that we combined all of the other components into the remaining chunk of time, so 75 in this case. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, why we combine them all like that. In the younger grades, there's designated time. If you have Hegarty, there's designated time for Hegarty. And then it just gives you that guidance on Orton Gillingham, because you could easily take the HMH materials in first grade and spend your entire 120-minute block just doing HMH and probably want to get everything done. But we know we need to hold true to the Orton Gillingham training and implement that lesson plan with fidelity. And there's, you guys have the breakdown of all the components, but we want to make sure that we're designating about 60 to 70 minutes of that of your time for Orton Gillingham and the rest from HMH. And then you'll see that the small group, there's not a designated time for small group because you guys have the autonomy to figure out for tier 1 instruction when you're doing small group. So within Orton Gillingham, you decide what parts of that are going to work best in small group. When you're working on HMH, you're going to figure out as you get going what parts of that is going to be done in small group, or when you're split it in your class and have to do something with this half and then something else with the other half. So we didn't designate a specific amount of time, just combined for you, so you have that autonomy. We do want to talk about the writing or the assessment expectations. There are lots of assessments provided in HMH, and we certainly don't want to use all of the assessments and overwhelm our students and ourselves even with data that we're not utilizing and extra testing time for kids. So as a district, we are going to commit to giving the module assessments. Module assessments are every 3 weeks, and they're pretty rigorous assessments. We think they're going to give us some really strong data and information. Grades 3 through 5, that will be the basis of the data that you're using in your TBT. So you'll have time during your TBTs to get into that and analyze those and plan instruction. We are going to put together a district writing team because we know that the feedback through the adoption process is that we could use some improvements to parts of the assessment so it more closely aligns with the OST. For example, there were not A and B part questions. HMH has updated that. Those updates for the grades, I think it's just 3 through 5, have part A and B, but those are only online. They're not updated on the printable part. So when you go into HMH, you have the option to do it online or printable. The updates with the part A, B questions are on the online portion. They have not done anything yet with a writing prompt or questions that require students to pull information from both passages. So we know that's a need. So we are going to put together a district writing team that is going to look at those assessments and make those improvements. Then we will link those for you, get that information out, link them hopefully to the pacing guides, because the expectation will be is that every third grader is taking the same module assessment. Every second grader is taking the same module assessment. And that we, as teachers, you're not going to delete questions or make modifications, that we just have this common assessment for the modules. That being said, we'll have lots of options with the other assessments. So you have weekly tests, there's selection tests. You can use those however you would like. You can use them as tests as needed, and then you can modify them and delete questions and do whatever you think best meets the needs of your students. You don't have to use them as tests. We certainly don't want to just give our students a test every week just because it's Friday. So you want to say, what information do I need from my students right now? What type of assessment is best going to get that? I'm going to have Ellen jump in here and talk about, you don't have to just give a paper pencil test.
Yep. Yeah. For the formative assessments, you could be doing, any sort of project that you might want to supplement. Again, you have a little bit of autonomy and teacher creativeness here that you can use. You can use formative assessment as a discussion. Like if you have a discussion in your class, you could use that as, something to put in the grade book as a formative assessment. So just as you kind of get more familiar with the curriculum, you can kind of decide what you think would be best for your formative assessments instead of just always giving the weekly tests. And
you can use those weekly tests as small group work. You can pull students over in a certain group of students that you feel needs extra practice or reading opportunities. So you could do lots of different things with those. And also when we talk about the module assessments, we are giving that, right? Everybody's giving those module assessments every 3 weeks, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of that information goes into your grade book. We're going to talk about that when it gets a little bit closer to giving that module assessment. We'll give you an update on some ideas. We might just pull certain portions of that and enter the grade book. And so know that we're giving it as assessment, but that doesn't automatically equal that has to go into the grade book. So you'll hear more about that later. Let's see, I think now we're on writing. So the HMH comes with its own writing workshop teacher's guide, right? And in the your other teacher's manual at the bottom, I think it's in green, it gives you the overview of what's going to happen in the writing workshop. We are definitely doing things a little bit differently than HMH is suggesting. So you're going to see that you have a lot more autonomy for what you're doing with writing for your students. Each module has students going through a mode of writing. So for example, in 5th grade, the first module, they're doing an expository text for 3 weeks. In 3rd grade, the first module, they're doing a personal narrative for 3 weeks. The expectation is that all students are going to, in 3rd grade, will do a personal narrative in that time. The expectation is that all 5th grade students will do an expository essay in that 3-week time. However, as a teacher, you get to decide the pacing, the prompts, and all of the materials that you're using. You can certainly use what's outlined in the writing workshop and follow their pacing as long as you're, we'll talk more about that. That probably won't be rigorous enough for you, but you can use those materials, but you don't have to. If you want to just say, hey, I'm going to do an expository essay, but I'm not going to use the prompt or any of the materials they're providing, that's fine. It's same thing with the personal narrative. We just want our students to be exposed to that genre across the district. But if you want to spend 3 days on it instead of 3 weeks, that's okay. If you want to follow it exactly as it is, that's okay too. With that being said, there are some other components that are listed in the reading block. I'm actually going to go down to this slide where it says engage and respond. Within the reading block, it says engage and respond, and it says write a response. We're going to encourage all grade levels to really take a look at those, because what we found is that those are excellent writing opportunities for your students. They're evidence-based, connected to the text. They require students to go back in and pull evidence. I think it'll go along nicely with some of the Peel writing that we're already doing and the success we've had with some of those initiatives. So that's why the reading and writing block in your scope and sequence or your pacing guide, we didn't designate 2 different times, because we feel that a lot of these written responses in the engage and respond are in the reading, but you'll actually use that as part of your writing. So if you're looking for other opportunities outside of what's provided in the writing workshop, that's where we encourage you to look. So hopefully, if you have any questions on that part, but again, you're expected to make sure that your students follow that mode of writing anywhere within that 3-week window. So when it's in the module, you make sure that your students are taught that mode. Does that make sense, Ellen? Anything else with that?
Yeah, and I think it'll make more sense as we look through the curriculum, which is
what we're about to do.
We're going to do next. Okay. All right, so we're going to switch tabs here to HMH, and Pat sent out an email a couple days ago that you're going to be able to find that in your bookmarks. You're going to go down to Into Reading. I didn't realize that. I was looking for the letters HMH, so it's Into Reading, and then choose your grade level. So up here, you can choose whatever grade level you'd like to go to. In our case today, we're going to be looking at 5th grade, the first module in 5th grade. Okay. Again, we could spend all day on this. This is just going to be a super brief overview. So we have your modules. You see a place for your standards. It just has the Ohio ELA learning standards in there. And then the All Resources tab is going to be very important to you as you go ahead and explore. But for now, we're just going to walk through a module. So you can access your electronic teacher guide right here. You're going to have one in your hand as well, but here's the one that's online. And I'm just going to click over to this tab, which is where we're at right now. Actually, I want to go back to here. But so actually, we're going to go to module at a glance. So then this is your online teacher's edition. You'll see the module at a glance. It looks very much like the pacing guide that was sent out to you. Again, remember, we're kind of living in this world here with the knowledge and language and the vocabulary. We're still doing writing, but like we said, you kind of have a little bit of autonomy with that. And let me see here. So that's there just for you to get a quick overview. And then I like this part right here, teaching with text sets, because it kind of gives you an idea of, it definitely gives you an idea of the stories that are in your module for each week. So you can see a quick glance what's going to be discussed. In this case, for 5th grade, it's about inventors. We're going to read a story about Thomas Edison. There's a persuasive essay. There's a magazine article, an informational text. And then there's even like a fictional fantasy text that has to do with invention. So it's nice because you have a bunch of different genres surrounding the same topic. Over here, this book is the focal text. That's the one where you got 6 copies for each module. And again, this aligns directly with the Writer's Workshop. So you're welcome to use the focal text. You're welcome to use the Writer's Workshop, as we said, but it's not going to be something that's required just because of how vaguely the writing prompts are written. Okay. So you may end up, give yourself some time to get into HMH, kind of see how you might want to use those focal texts. Maybe it's in a small group. Maybe you're just reading the book aloud to your entire class. That's going to be up to you. You have a little bit of creative license there to use that as you see fit with your class. I'm going to go back up to my contents over here, and I am going to skip down to kicking off the module. And the reason I'm just pointing this page out is simply because when we were adopting the different curricula, or on the adoption team, one of the things that people really wanted was a connection with families. So there's that family letter that you can click on the link and print off, or you can send it as an email to your parents. And then you can see that there's goal setting for students on that page as well. All right, so as we get started, we're going to get started on week 1, module 1. And again, I'm in 5th grade, but they all look pretty similar across the grade levels. Only thing I want to point out here is notice that they do a connection right up here. It might be a science connection, social studies, language arts, math connection, but that's where you can find that. And it's going to be different in every grade level, in every module. If you're looking for text to connect to your science and social studies resources, what we found as we kind of have been looking through this is that the Rigby readers might be best for that. They have a lot of different informational texts, and you have access to all the grade levels. So if you're not finding what you need in your own grade level, you might want to look up, into 4th grade or 5th grade or down to 2nd grade or whatever to see if you can find books that would align with your science and social studies.
And I think that goes back to what we started with, is as you're finding those connections, jot that on those pacing guides so that as a district we can come together and get some feedback and then provide some more specific resources for next year's pacing guides. We can add those connections for everybody.
Yep. All right. And so then we're going to look at our week at a glance now. And again, going to look very much like your pacing guide, and it looks very much like the modules at a glance, except we're only looking at it from a week perspective here. Let's see. One of the things I did want to point out, and I know, this is a new curriculum. We don't want it to be overwhelming. You may or may not get to stations right away, but they do have some examples of literacy stations and resources within HMH that you can use. But again, you can also remember you have that creative license. You could be using morphology as a station. You could be using those focal texts as a station. You could be using those weekly assessments that you're not required to give as a station, just to get, kids working on certain skills. But I wanted to just point that out to you. Not that you might want to go through a couple modules first before you get that started, or if you're ready to go, those resources are there for you.
So with small groups, that is still very much an expectation from the district, right? We've done a lot of work as a district for small groups and ELA. So we're still doing that. It's just you're going to figure out within your block that those tier 1 small groups, you're figuring out which materials. You simply aren't going to be able to utilize all the materials. So you might be doing small groups, but pulling from a Rigby reader, or you might be pulling just from the contents that are listed under reading. So you might not necessarily when you're doing small groups, you might not necessarily be using the small group materials simply because you don't have time to get to those. Mm-hmm. I can see a lot of those being utilized in the IE time that you'll hear about a little bit more later. But I think don't feel overwhelmed when it says small group, that you're also, the expectations that you also have to teach all the things that it says under reading, somehow get in writing, and then do all the things listed in small group. It's not going to happen. So you're doing small groups with your students so that you can provide differentiated instruction, but you can use the materials listed in reading. Can we go back to the week at a glance for 1 second? Yeah. I want to make sure that we point out that under that reading block, this stuff is good. So when we look all of these pieces, when you go through, you guys have this. Did you already show this?
No,
this,
not yet.
The teaching pal. This has Ellen will kind of go through this, but the prompts and the outline that's listed for the reading we found to be a very nice pathway. And so we encourage you to, when you're feeling overwhelmed, to start there and work your way down through, and it goes all the way to the engage and respond. That might be a bulk of what you're doing during your reading block.
Yep. Yeah. And there's some pretty quality questions in there and discussions and all that. So, all right, so let's get started looking at that. So if we go to, and again, I'm just navigating again from our content page. So we're going to go to lesson 1, and this is from module 1. And Claire just mentioned the teaching pal. There's an electronic link to it right there. But again, you have a handheld one as well. What's nice about this one that's in your hand, right, is you have all the little teacher notes right here on the side. Sorry, trying to figure out which direction to go. You have all the little notes to the teachers right here in the margins, which is really, really nice. You have that on the electronic version as well, but it can be a little bit confusing. So let me show that to you real quick. When we get there. So you'll notice that this is the beginning. They're going to have some sort of inspirational quote. Right here, though, this is what I wanted to point out. Here's the notes part. So this is the part that it looks like a little sticky note in the handheld version. This is what it looks like on the electronic version. So just know that those notes are there, but they're hidden if you don't have it clicked on, okay? Here's another thing that I realized as I was looking at it. If you click on this icon that says notes, all of the notes for the module are going to come up, right? So, and that's fine if you want that. But if you want to just know, like, what are the specific notes for this particular page in my teaching pal, click on this little graduation cap, it looks like, off to the side, and it's going to highlight for you, like, this is the one that goes with this page. So that way you know what notes you're looking at. All right, so as we walk through the module, you're always going to have an essential question. There's going to be a theme to your module. In this case, it's inventors. There's an engaging little video here that can kind of spark some discussion. And again, don't forget about those notes if you want to look at them. They're right there. Again, you have teacher creativity here, but if you're lost and you're just wanting to follow the notes that they have for you, they're right there for you, okay? And then you get into the text. And again, a lot of times they'll have this little short read in the very beginning. And again, you have a ton of notes as a teacher. The kids' version is nice because then they have their own copy that they can write in. And they have room off to the side in the margins where they can take notes themselves. So you as the teacher might be reading and asking questions. They can respond in the margin, or maybe before you start reading it, you can ask the students to pay attention to something specific, and that they can put those notes in the margin of the book as well. All right, so then you're going to get in after your short read, there's going to be a genre study. In this case, it's nonfiction. They're reading a story about Thomas Edison. There's always like these nice little pre-writing kind of questions to think about. In this case, what do you know about these inventors and their work? What do you want to learn? Type your ideas below. Again, you may type, or you can handwrite in the teacher, or the, what is the kids called? Kids are called My Pal. Yeah, or My Book. Sorry, it's called My Book.
So the teaching, if you don't know this
Pal.
already, the Teaching Pal, where am I? The Teaching Pal just has all the teacher's notes for exactly what's in the student version, which is called My Book. So it's the,
we've looked at this all summer and we're still learning all the different wording that they have. Notice they have the critical vocabulary here, and then they always have like a meet the author and illustrator too, which is kind of nice to get the kids interested in reading the book. Okay. And then again, you'll just go through the story. Teacher's notes are off to the side. If you have the electronic version, if you just are holding your handheld Teacher Pal, it's right there for you. It's really, really nice. I'm going to skip ahead. So we've read The Inventor's Secret, what Thomas Edison told Henry Ford, and we're going to go down to the collaborative discussion. So these are the questions Claire was referring to before that work at, well, first there's a discussion and then there's writing prompts, right? So what's nice about this is they ask some pretty higher level questioning. They also have them go back to the text, which again, 3rd through 5th grade teachers, I know this was something that you all wanted because we want to kind of mimic the OST and make sure that they're looking for evidence in the text. So they'll ask you questions like this, like what words and actions in the text show how Thomas and Henry are alike. Again, you can have they have room to type or room to write if they're in their book. And then how does the author reveal Henry's feelings about Thomas? So again, you can just kind of see that some of the questioning is just a little bit better than what we had in the writer's workshop. Excuse me.
and again, this is just a discussion prompt. When you see the writing prompt, you'll see it's even more connected. So these, but we don't, this would be a part that people might have a tendency to skip, but
Yeah.
I think we want to encourage you to utilize this in your classroom for discussion for your students.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because the discussion then is going to maybe help as they go to answer the questions and do the writing prompts. They can think back to this discussion that you had in class, and it might help them, to have something to work off of. So then you get to the cite text evidence, and this is the writing response that we were talking about. You can see they're pretty meaty, right? So this one's going to ask several different questions. It says, think about each invention and why it was created, excuse me, that was mentioned in the story. How do Edison's inventions improve people's lives? Why did Ford want to create a gas-powered car? You have to cite evidence from the text. And so they allow you time to do some pre-writing. I would also encourage you here, if you have writing graphic organizers that you might want to use, this might be where Peel comes in, that you get all of that ready to go. And then you get into the actual writing on demand, which again, we all know is on the OST, and that kids are expected to write a 3 to 5 paragraph essay in 45 minutes.
So sometimes you might have, this might be something that you're working on for, several days as part of your reading/writing block. So sometimes this might be like, hey, you guys are just going to do this. Other times you're going to walk them through it. And in the student version, it's right here in the book. Clearly you don't have to use, I know some people weren't a fan of just these blocks. So again, they can be doing this, but then working on a Google Doc or a different type of paper if you prefer. But know that it's all right in there.
Yeah. And then we get into our next story. And again, I think if we looked at week at a glance, I think this was for week 2. But again, what I like about this, different type of genre. Now we're getting into a magazine article, still the same theme with inventions, but we're reading a magazine article. They give you a nice little, like you want to think about it before you start reading it. They have background knowledge. In this case, instead of the meet the author, they have build background knowledge, so you can read a little bit about it. And then you get into the stories again. And it's basically, this is what it looks like for each of these stories. If I were to go down here, I can go back to, again, our collaborative discussion. And then you can see that there's some great discussion questions here. And then you can get into the citing the evidence and writing a response once again. So, I mean, this is what each week is basically going to look like. And like we said, this is maybe what you can base your writing off of right now until we have some of those comparative writing responses ready to go for you.
Do you have more to walk them through?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so I would just say, I know the other thing is that we feel like, oh, there's a lot of different standards and different concepts taught within a module, within a week. I think as we start to look at those module assessments, the answer key is a place to go where it kind of outlines the standards are covered. So during TBT time, that's something that we do at the start of a module. We would be looking at that and saying, okay, what are the standards covered? Which ones are we going to emphasize more? And then for your formative, you might choose to have a formative assessment before the module on one of those specific standards that you want to hit a little bit more heavily. So we'll get into that more, but I know that that's something on everybody's mind, is like the standards and how it kind of maybe hits several different things, and we're not used to that. But from the things that I've read, people say that it really does spiral back around, and they do get deeper with it. It's just not happening all within 1 week. So that's something that we'll experience and take notes and, have discussions during TBT too, as we have those grade level across the district discussions too about what we're seeing. So
this is a lot of information. If you have questions, feel free to email us. We may or may not know the answer, but we will look it up for you if we don't know. And I think that's it.
Yeah. Have a great year. Have a great start to the year.
Yep.